My beloved child, before you decide what that night meant, listen carefully, because the truth behind it is far more unexpected than what your heart may have imagined. Your soulmate may have appeared to have the perfect night with someone else, smiling, talking, laughing, surrounded by an atmosphere that looked effortless from the outside. But what you saw, what you heard, or what your intuition has been telling you may only be the surface of a story that has another chapter hidden underneath it. And this is where everything begins to change. There is a reason this message found you at this exact moment. The angels are bringing attention to something your soulmate has been unable to explain, even to themselves. That night may have looked complete, beautiful, almost picture-perfect, yet somewhere inside your soulmate, something felt strangely unfinished. There was a moment when the conversation became quiet, when the smile disappeared for just a second, when their thoughts drifted somewhere they never expected them to go. And that place was you. They tried to stay present. They tried to enjoy what was happening around them. They tried to convince themselves that everything was fine. But there was one thought they could not silence. One memory they could not push away. One person their heart kept returning to when nobody was watching. And that is why you cannot understand this story simply by looking at what happened on the outside. Because the angels are revealing that the most important part of that night was not the person standing beside your soulmate, it was the person occupying their thoughts when everything became quiet. There is something even deeper you need to understand, because your soulmate did not walk into that night carrying an empty heart. They carried memories. They carried unfinished emotions. They carried words they never said to you and questions they never had the courage to ask. At some point during that night, something reminded them of you. It could have been a song, a familiar expression, a place, a small detail, or even something completely ordinary that suddenly became incredibly meaningful. And in that instant, the atmosphere changed inside them. They realized that being around someone is not the same as feeling connected to someone. They realized that laughter does not automatically mean happiness. They realized that a beautiful moment can still leave the heart searching for something deeper. This is the revelation the angels want you to hear. Your soulmate may have been physically present somewhere else, but emotionally, a part of them was still having a conversation with you. They remembered the way you made them feel understood without requiring explanations. They remembered moments when your presence felt peaceful rather than complicated. They remembered something about your connection that they had tried to minimize. And suddenly, the perfect night did not feel as perfect as it appeared. Not because something terrible happened, and not because you need to fear anyone, but because your soulmate discovered a truth they had been avoiding. Sometimes the heart becomes clearest when everything around it becomes loud. Sometimes a person can be surrounded by attention and still recognize the absence of the one connection that truly matters to them. And that night may have become the moment your soulmate finally understood that their feelings for you were not as easy to forget as they had hoped. But wait, because there is one detail about this night that changes the entire meaning of what you think happened. Your soulmate noticed something about themselves. They noticed that they were comparing the experience to what they had felt with you. Not necessarily consciously at first. It may have happened through a simple reaction, a laugh that did not feel the same, a conversation that lacked depth, a moment when they instinctively wanted to tell you something before realizing you were not there. That tiny realization stayed with them. And the angels are showing this as a turning point. Your soulmate may have thought distance would make their feelings disappear. They may have believed that if they kept moving, kept meeting people, kept creating new memories, eventually the old emotions would become insignificant. But instead, that night exposed the opposite. The more they tried to experience something new, the more clearly they recognized what was missing. And now they are facing a question they can no longer easily escape: why am I still thinking about this person? That question has become louder than the moment itself. They may not be ready to admit everything yet, but internally, something has shifted. The night that looked like proof that they had moved forward may actually have become proof that their heart has not completely moved on. And this is why the angels are asking you not to judge the entire story from one photograph, one message, one social moment, or one assumption. What appears obvious from a distance can be completely different when you understand what was happening inside the person. Your soulmate has emotions they have not fully processed, and one of those emotions is connected directly to you. There is still a chapter between you that their heart does not consider finished. And now, my beloved child, stay with this final thought, because this is where the hidden truth becomes even more powerful. Your soulmate's perfect night may have ended normally on the outside, but something followed them home that they could not simply leave behind. It was the realization that no matter how peaceful everything looked, there was still a name their heart remembered differently. There was still a connection that carried emotional weight. There was still a question about you that remained unanswered. And the angels are not revealing this to make you jealous or to make you chase your soulmate. They are revealing it because you deserve to understand that appearances do not always tell the complete story. Your soulmate may have smiled that night, but a smile cannot reveal every thought. They may have enjoyed certain moments, but enjoyment does not erase emotional history. They may have looked completely fine, but looking fine and feeling completely settled are two very different things. Somewhere beneath the surface, your soulmate is beginning to recognize that what they have been trying to move past may actually be something they need to understand. And there is one specific realization from that night that they have not told you yet, something they discovered about their own feelings that could completely change the way you understand their silence. The angels are bringing that revelation closer, because the next part of this story is not about who was beside them that night, it is about what happened inside their heart when they realized who they were truly missing. There is something your soulmate realized after that night that they never expected to feel, and this is where the story becomes much deeper than you think. When everything finally became quiet, when there were no more conversations to distract them and no one around to influence their thoughts, your soulmate was left alone with their own emotions. And that was the moment your memory became impossible to ignore. They started replaying small moments with you, not the dramatic ones, but the ordinary ones that somehow carried the most meaning. A simple conversation. A look. A moment when you understood them without them explaining themselves. Something about those memories felt different now. Before that night, your soulmate could tell themselves that those memories belonged to the past. But afterward, they began wondering why those memories still had so much power over their heart. They asked themselves whether they had actually moved forward or simply learned how to hide what they were feeling. And the angels are revealing something important here. Sometimes a person does not recognize the value of a connection until they experience something that looks similar from the outside but feels completely different within. That night may have given your soulmate exactly that comparison. They saw how easy it was to spend time with someone, yet how difficult it was to recreate the emotional familiarity they once felt with you. They realize that chemistry, attention, laughter, and companionship are not automatically the same as emotional connection. And once that realization entered their mind, they could not simply erase it. Something had changed. The night they thought would help them forget became the night that reminded them why they had never truly forgotten you. But here is the part: your soulmate may be struggling to understand themselves. They are not only missing you, they are beginning to miss the version of themselves they were when they were connected to you. Around you, something inside them felt more open. They could imagine possibilities they rarely admitted to anyone else. They felt seen in places where they usually kept their emotions hidden. And after experiencing another night that looked perfect but did not create that same feeling, they started recognizing the difference. They may have looked at their phone afterward and almost reached for your name. They may have typed something and deleted it. They may have opened an old conversation, looked at a photograph, or simply sat there thinking about what they would say if you were suddenly standing in front of them. And then came the question. Important because it reveals the conflict happening inside them. One part of them wants to appear unaffected, independent, and completely comfortable with the direction their life has taken. Another part knows that there is still an emotional door connected to you that they never fully closed. They may not know what to do with that realization yet. They may even resist it. But resistance does not always mean absence of feeling. Sometimes resistance is what happens when a person encounters a truth they were not prepared to accept. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that they cannot simply replace a meaningful connection by creating new experiences. And that realization is quietly changing the way they look at you, themselves, and the choices they have made. And now I want you to pay attention to the smallest detail, because this is where the angels are pointing. Your soulmate remembered something you once said, something that seemed insignificant at the time. Maybe it was a sentence about love, timing, trust, or simply about how you wanted to be understood. They remembered your voice saying it. They remembered your expression. They remembered the feeling surrounding that moment. And suddenly, that old sentence sounded completely different. It became almost like a message they were finally ready to understand. That is why the night stayed with them longer than expected. It was not simply about another person. It was about your soulmate discovering that their emotional connection to you had survived distance, silence, uncertainty, and time. And the more they tried to explain it away, the more questions appeared. Why does this person still matter? Why do I still remember the smallest things? Why do I still imagine telling them certain news first? Why does their absence feel different from everyone else's? These questions are not random. They are signs of an internal awakening, a moment when someone begins looking honestly at their own heart. And if you have felt recently that something about your soulmate's energy seems different, that sense may be connected to this internal shift. Do not force it. Do not chase it. Let the truth unfold naturally. Because the most powerful part of this story is not that your soulmate spent a night with someone else. It is what that experience taught them about the connection they still carry with you. And before this part ends, there is one final revelation you need to hold on to, because the angels are showing that your soulmate did not leave that night thinking only about what happened. They left thinking about what was missing. That distinction changes everything. They began wondering whether the person they were trying to move toward was actually the person their heart wanted, or whether they had simply been trying to convince themselves that they were ready for something new. They realize that a perfect-looking moment can still leave a person emotionally unsettled when their heart has unfinished feelings somewhere else. And you became part of that realization. Not because you demanded anything from them, not because you were chasing them, but because your memory appeared naturally when they least expected it. That is what made the realization powerful. Your soulmate may still have questions. They may still be figuring out what they truly want. But something inside them has become impossible to ignore. They are starting to recognize that what they feel for you has a depth they cannot measure by distance or silence. And the angels are revealing that the next realization will be even more personal, because your soulmate is beginning to understand the exact moment when their feelings for you became something they could no longer pretend was ordinary. That moment is connected to a memory they have kept hidden for much longer than you realize. Something happened in your soulmate's heart that night that they did not expect, and this is the part they have been keeping completely to themselves. After everything was over, they found themselves returning to one particular memory of you again and again. It was not necessarily the biggest moment you shared. In fact, it may have been something so simple that you probably never realized how deeply it stayed with them. Maybe it was the way you looked at them when they were speaking, the way you listened without interrupting, or the way you made an ordinary moment feel strangely meaningful. That memory suddenly became vivid again, and your soulmate began wondering why it still carried so much emotion. They tried to distract themselves, but every distraction eventually brought them back to the same realization: there was something about your connection that they had never properly understood. They had mistaken distance for closure. They had mistaken silence for moving on. And perhaps they had even mistaken a new experience for proof that their old feelings were gone. But that night quietly challenged all of those assumptions. Your soulmate began seeing the difference between being around someone and genuinely feeling known by someone. They realized that there are people who can make you smile for an evening, and there are people whose presence stays inside your heart long after the evening ends. You belong to the second category in their mind. That realization may have surprised them because they thought they had more control over their emotions. They thought they could decide when something was finished. But feelings do not always follow the timeline the mind creates. Sometimes the heart keeps a connection alive quietly, waiting for the moment when the person is finally ready to acknowledge it. And that night may have been exactly that moment for your soulmate. Then came the realization they were least prepared for. Your soulmate started remembering the things they never told you. The words they almost said but swallowed. The questions they wanted to ask but never asked. The moments when they wanted to reach out but convinced themselves that silence was easier. Suddenly, those unfinished conversations felt heavier, not because they were filled with regret alone, but because your soulmate began understanding that they may have underestimated how important you were to them. They remembered how naturally they once wanted to share little things with you. They remembered wanting to tell you about their day, wanting to hear your opinion, wanting to know what you were thinking. Those tiny impulses meant something. They were signs of emotional attachment that your soulmate may not have appreciated at the time. And now, when they compare those feelings with what they experienced that night, the difference becomes impossible for them to ignore. They may still appear calm on the outside. They may continue with their normal routine. They may even act as though nothing has changed. But internally, they are asking themselves questions that have no easy answers. Why does your name still appear in their thoughts when they are trying to focus on something else? Why do certain memories of you still feel so alive? Why does the idea of reconnecting suddenly seem less frightening than the idea of never knowing what could have happened between you? These are the questions slowly breaking through the walls they built around their emotions. And the angels are showing that this process is not about forcing a reunion or predicting exactly what your soulmate will do next. It is about understanding what their heart has been trying to communicate to them for a long time. Now listen closely, because the most emotional moment may have happened after they were completely alone. There was a point when your soulmate stopped trying to analyze everything and simply allowed themselves to feel. And in that quiet moment, they recognized something they had been avoiding. They missed the emotional safety they associated with you. Not simply your attention. Not simply your presence. You. The person behind the memories. The person whose smallest habits they remembered without trying. The person whose voice could still trigger a feeling they could not easily explain. That realization may have brought a strange mixture of comfort and sadness. Comfort because they finally understood why their heart had been unsettled. Sadness because they realized that ignoring a feeling does not make it disappear. And this is where the angels are asking you to be patient with the story. Do not turn this revelation into pressure. Do not try to force an outcome. Let your soulmate come to their own understanding. The strongest emotional shifts happen when a person discovers the truth themselves. Your soulmate is beginning to see that what happened between you was not simply a temporary chapter that could be replaced by another experience. It left an imprint. And that imprint has remained quietly present even when life became busy and circumstances changed. Perhaps that is why certain songs suddenly remind them of you. Perhaps that is why familiar places bring back memories. Perhaps that is why they sometimes wonder what your life looks like now. These small moments may seem insignificant, but together they reveal something powerful. Their emotional connection to you never disappeared as completely as they wanted to believe. And here is the revelation you need to carry into the next part of this story. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that the person they were with that night was never the real question. The real question was why, despite everything happening around them, their heart kept returning to you. That question has become the center of their private thoughts. They may not have an answer yet, but they are getting closer to one. They are realizing that sometimes you only discover what truly matters when something else gives you a chance to compare. And the comparison did not make them forget you. It made your emotional significance clearer. This does not mean every detail of